Tonight, Europe faces a political earthquake, one that could reshape the continent's future in ways few could have predicted just months ago. In a stunning development, Hungary, a long-standing member of both the EU and NATO, has accepted an invitation to join the BRICS economic bloc, aligning itself with emerging powers outside the traditional Western sphere. This move marks the most significant rupture in EU history, signaling a formal break from Brussels and a dramatic realignment with nations openly challenging the Western-led order. The shockwaves are being felt in every European capital tonight. Hungary's entry into a bloc with Russia and China strikes at the very heart of EU unity, raising urgent questions about the future of the European project and the stability of the alliance itself. How can a nation belong to both the EU and a rival geopolitical alliance? This paradox is unprecedented, and it's forcing leaders to confront uncomfortable realities about loyalty, sovereignty, and the limits of European integration. Officials in Brussels and Washington are scrambling to respond, reacting with disbelief, condemnation, and a sense of urgency as they try to contain the fallout from this historic decision. The timing is critical. Europe is already under immense strain from ongoing geopolitical tensions, economic uncertainty, and internal divisions that have left many feeling vulnerable. Hungary is now straddling two worlds, attempting a delicate balancing act that many analysts believe cannot last without serious consequences for both sides. For citizens across Europe, the implications for security, prosperity, and the very identity of the continent are only beginning to sink in, sparking debates in homes, cafes, and parliaments alike. Will Hungary's bold move isolate it on the world stage, or could it inspire other nations to reconsider their own alliances and follow a similar path? Tonight, we unpack why Hungary made this historic choice, how the world is reacting, and what it could mean for the future of Europe as we know it. One thing is certain, the political map of Europe was redrawn today, and the consequences will echo for years to come. In a televised address, Prime Minister Viktor Orbán declared Hungary's acceptance of the BRICS invitation, calling it a historic step towards sovereign foreign policy. Orbán argued that the global economic center is shifting eastward, and Hungary must secure new markets and investments. He framed the move as pragmatic, not a rejection of Europe, but an embrace of global opportunity. The Budapest Declaration formalizes years of deepening ties with Russia and China, including major infrastructure and energy deals. By joining BRICS, Hungary elevates these relationships to a multilateral alliance outside the Western framework. Orbán insists Hungary can remain in the EU and NATO while joining BRICS, but critics call this contradictory and dangerous. The West fears Hungary could become a spoiler within both alliances, potentially undermining key decisions and leaking sensitive information. The stage is set for a dramatic test of dual allegiances. Orbán's decision is the culmination of over a decade of defiance against Brussels. His government has clashed with the EU on rule of law, media freedom, and migration, resulting in frozen funds and deepening rifts. Economically, Hungary has pivoted east, maintaining energy ties with Russia and welcoming Chinese investment. Joining BRICS is the logical endpoint of Orbán's long-term strategy to diversify dependencies and reduce reliance on the West. He believes the era of Western dominance is ending, and Hungary must be agile to survive in a multipolar world. Domestically, this move reinforces Orbán's image as a defender of sovereignty, consolidating his power at home. Critics see it as a high-stakes gamble that risks Hungary's alliances for uncertain gains. But for Orbán, it's a calculated bet on the future. Brussels responded swiftly, calling Hungary's move incompatible with EU principles and convening an emergency meeting. The EU faces a dilemma: act harshly and risk pushing Hungary further away, or do nothing and appear weak. Article 7, which could suspend Hungary's voting rights, is now on the table. In Washington, Hungary's NATO membership raises alarms about intelligence sharing and alliance cohesion. The Pentagon is evaluating the impact, fearing Hungary could become a conduit for Russian and Chinese influence. The US must choose between sanctions, unprecedented against a NATO ally, or diplomatic containment. Some suggest limiting Hungary's access to sensitive NATO information and exercises. The move complicates U.S. strategy as it faces challenges from both Russia and China. Hungary has handed a strategic victory to America's rivals without firing a shot. The Western alliance is now forced to reconsider its own unity. While the West recoiled, BRICS nations welcomed Hungary with open arms. Moscow called it a diplomatic coup, fracturing EU and NATO unity and rewarding Russia's long-term investment in Budapest. Beijing emphasized economic cooperation, seeing Hungary as a gateway to the EU market and a propaganda win for China's global vision. Other BRICS members hailed Hungary's inclusion as proof of the bloc's expanding influence and legitimacy. The BRICS New Development Bank immediately began talks with Budapest on infrastructure financing, offering Hungary an alternative to EU funds. For Hungary, this means new capital and a seat at a financial institution challenging Western dominance. The contrast is stark: a warm embrace from BRICS, a cold shoulder from Brussels. Orbán uses this to reinforce his narrative of sovereign choice. Hungary's pivot is now a global headline. Hungary's decision to pivot toward a multipolar world is rooted in careful economic calculation and a desire to secure its future prosperity. The government increasingly sees the future of global growth in the East and Global South, with BRICS Plus nations projected to drive the next wave of economic expansion and innovation. Trade with China has soared in recent years, and Chinese investment, especially in high-tech sectors like battery manufacturing, has rapidly transformed Hungary's industrial landscape, creating new jobs and boosting exports. By joining BRICS, Hungary hopes to accelerate foreign investment, diversify its economic partnerships, and secure preferential access to vast new markets across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Energy security is another crucial factor. Hungary relies heavily on Russian imports for oil and gas, and sees BRICS membership as a way to lock in more stable, potentially cheaper supplies for the long term. But the risks are huge. Over 75% of Hungary's trade is still with the EU, and any harsh EU response, such as sanctions or trade barriers, could devastate its economy and threaten thousands of jobs. The forint's sharp drop after the announcement signals deep market anxiety and uncertainty about Hungary's future direction. The government is betting that the EU won't risk disrupting the single market, counting on powerful German industry and other key partners to oppose any punitive measures that could hurt their own interests. It's a high-stakes gamble. Will the East's long-term gains truly outweigh the West's short-term pain? For Hungary, the answer remains uncertain, and only time will tell if this bold bet pays off. Hungary's move sets it apart from its Central European neighbors, who remain committed to the transatlantic alliance. While others see Russia as a threat, Hungary's pivot is viewed as reckless and destabilizing. Mainstream powers like Germany and France push for EU unity. Orbán champions sovereign freedom to forge new alliances. Even Euro-skeptic parties elsewhere stop short of joining rival blocs led by China and Russia. Hungary is now isolated within the EU, with former regional partners condemning its decision. The Visegrad Group is effectively dead, and Hungary stands alone. Orbán has traded regional partnerships for a seat at a global table. This choice fundamentally redefines Hungary's place in Europe. The continent's political landscape has shifted. Hungary's decision has triggered a profound crisis of confidence within both the European Union and NATO, shaking the very foundations of Europe's security architecture. In response, the EU may now push harder than ever for majority voting on foreign policy, aiming to end the national veto that Hungary has repeatedly used to block key decisions and stall collective action. Meanwhile, NATO faces the real prospect of evolving into a two-tier alliance, with Hungary kept at arm's length from sensitive intelligence, high-level planning, and critical military discussions. Even Article 5's core security guarantees could come under scrutiny, raising the uncomfortable question: can the alliance truly defend a member that appears increasingly aligned with its adversaries? The ripple effects are already being felt by EU hopefuls in the Balkans and Ukraine, who may now feel compelled to hedge their bets, weighing their options between East and West as uncertainty grows. Hungary's move could accelerate the fragmentation of Europe, pushing the continent further toward the formation of competing political and economic blocs. The post-Cold War dream of a unified, peaceful continent is now under serious threat as old divisions begin to resurface and new rifts appear. Instead of unity, a fractured and contested European space is emerging, marked by uncertainty and growing mistrust among neighbors. Other nations across the continent must now make a difficult choice. Should they double down on their commitment to the West, or be tempted by the opportunities and influence offered by the East? Hungary has forced this pivotal question upon Europe, and the answer will not only define the continent's future, but also determine the fate of its unity and security for years to come. Hungary's decision has shaken the foundations of post-Cold War Europe. It is now the only country to belong to both a Western military alliance and a rival economic bloc, led by China and Russia. The government frames this as a pragmatic bet on growth and sovereignty, but the risks are enormous. The EU and US are considering punitive measures, while BRICS nations celebrate a strategic victory. Hungary is isolated within Europe, its traditional allies denouncing the move. The long-term consequences are unknown, but the rules of the EU and NATO may be rewritten. The world could be dividing into new economic and political blocs, with Hungary at the fault line. Has Orbán drawn a new Iron Curtain? This time with economic and political allegiances? The story is far from over. Europe's future now hangs in the balance.